Vice President Pence visited Pittsburgh on Friday. He met with African-American faith leaders who shared their personal stories about racial injustice. The discussion comes as President Trump says he's preparing to take action on police reform. Skyler reports from the White House.
We are looking for ways to advance better standards, better training.
Vice President Mike Pence held a raw discussion on race and police reform with African-American faith leaders in Pittsburgh.
I'm tired that people still do not acknowledge that systemic racism is real.
White lives matter, and we don't deny that. But right now, white lives aren't being oppressed in the same way.
The conversation comes a day after President Trump promised to take action on police reform.
We're working to finalize an executive order that will encourage police departments nationwide to meet the most current professional standards of force. And that means force, but force with compassion.
Local officials in some cities have already begun to enact reforms. Congressional Democrats introduced their police reform bill earlier this week, and Senate Republicans are expected to unveil their proposals early next week. President Trump plans to return to the campaign trail next Friday and is pushing back against criticism. The date June 19th, known as Juneteenth, celebrates the end of slavery in the U.S. There is also controversy on the choice of venue, Tulsa, Oklahoma, the site of a race massacre that resulted in the deaths of hundreds of African-American residents nearly 100 years ago.
Was that on purpose?
No, we're going to Oklahoma. And if you think about it, relative to your question, think about it as a celebration.
In the nation's capital this weekend, protesters are expected back on the streets for more demonstrations against police violence.
And Skyler joins me now. We're also joined by Jacqueline Alemany. She's a Washington Post reporter and anchor of the Power Up newsletter. Skyler, we heard the president say in your piece that he's working on an executive order to, quote, encourage police departments to meet the most current professional standards for use of force. Encourage and current standards, that doesn't sound like a major push forward. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, the president mentioned yesterday that he really would like to see some sort of national standard for police departments across the country to follow in terms of use of force. But he also said that he wants it to be a compassionate use of force as well. As for if this is something that people necessarily want to see in terms of police reform, I don't know. But the president also did say that a part of his executive order when it comes to police reform would be including social workers that go out with law enforcement on certain cases. So that is something that is significant there in terms of the four-pillared approach, if you will, in terms of the president's introduction to rebuilding safety in America and addressing not only police reform, but helping help out those racial disparities that may exist throughout the country, especially in communities of color. So the president did say that he is making an attempt to do that. But the big thing there, though, is that he did say that he's not interested in defunding the police. Obviously, that's the big term that we've been hearing for the last few weeks. He said that that's not going to happen. If anything, they're going to have the best equipment available to them to do the jobs that they need to keep our communities safer, Lana.
All right, Jackie, you report that, quote, many Republicans and the president's inner circle have been increasingly concerned that Trump's comments and positions have failed to grasp the moment. I'm wondering what kinds of changes are other Republican leaders pushing for and how that squares with the White House.
Yeah, I mean, you see Republicans on the Hill as a whole pushing for police reform, which the president really has yet to utter 18 days after the death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police officers. But you even had someone like House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy yesterday, a Republican from California, who indicated that he would be in favor of banning chokeholds, which the president said today explicitly that he was against. You also had Senator Tim Scott, a Republican from South Carolina, and the only Black Republican in the upper chamber, who's going to be rolling out a comprehensive police reform plan on behalf of the GOP, where he said today, actually on CNN, that he saw a lot of overlap in some of the policies that House Democrats have been putting forward. Part of Scott's bill, which is far more specific than anything that we've heard from the White House so far, shows that it would call for making lynching a federal crime, a federal ban on police chokeholds, and restricting no-knock search warrants, which is how Breonna Taylor was killed in Louisville, Kentucky. So there, while the bill isn't as specific as what we've seen from House Democrats and doesn't go as far from the federal level, we've already heard Republicans say that they really want states to take responsibility more than the federal government. It does go a lot further than the White House. And at the end of the day, it really is up to the president about what he will sign. So there is a lot of concern, especially with polling out that shows the majority of Americans, do believe that systemic racism exists and that there should be some serious changes to policing and inequities in our law enforcement system.
Yeah. And Skyler, we saw Vice President Pence there with faith leaders in Pittsburgh on Friday. It sounded like they were really trying to impress upon him how widespread systemic racism actually is in this country. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the vice president's response to their comments was received?
Well, this was the conversation I think that we were waiting for with the president yesterday. This was more real, more honest in terms of just the black man's experience in America, in terms of experiencing confrontations with police as well as being racially profiled. These faith-based leaders did not hold back in terms of their perspectives, regardless of their party affiliation. And I think that was something that was perhaps missing yesterday. Yesterday's roundtable with the president in Dallas was more so of a touting of the administration work thus far in terms of helping out communities of color specifically. But today, I think the vice president got to hear firsthand from some of the people who were with him just that experience. Now, of course, with faith-based things, they're going to say that at its core, they would like to see the country move forward with faith at its core. I think the vice president echoed a similar sentiment as well while he was on stage as well. But again, he did go back to what the president had to say yesterday in terms of doing things to make sure that the police departments are properly funded. They're not looking forward to defunding the police in any way or anything like that. But he did want to make sure that he did hear those leaders that were on stage with him. Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania was on there with him as well. All of them sat there and they talked about those experiences. But in terms of what we will actually see in terms of reform, particularly from the White House, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, and Skyler, we also heard in your piece you discussed the controversy over the president's decision to hold a rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma on Juneteenth. Senator Kamala Harris said, quote, "This isn't just a wink to white supremacists. He's throwing them a welcome home party." And the DNC just put out a statement on the president's upcoming rally. What did it say?
Well, the DNC took a completely different stance than the RNC, obviously, right? Where we heard the RNC earlier this week say that this is going to be an opportunity for Republicans to shine in a city like Tulsa, Oklahoma, because a Republican did emancipate black people. The DNC has said something completely different. They say that the Trump campaign is using this and taking advantage of the moment. I want to use an exact sentence here. It says, "Juneteenth represents black liberation, a shedding of shackles of slavery, and America inching closer to sharing its promise with black people." And it went on to say that it is abundantly clear that health and the safety and well-being of black people, the Trump campaign simply does not care about. So a completely strong message from the DNC in terms of their perspective about the president holding his rally next Friday in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But the president said that this is an opportunity for a celebration in an interview on Fox News earlier today. And so I guess it remains to be seen what he says, what the messaging will be as he arrives in Oklahoma next week. But it's going to be one of those things where everybody's waiting and watching to see if he does address race in his remarks.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially the location there in Tulsa, the site of the Tulsa race massacre almost 100 years ago now at this point, something that seemed to catch the administration a bit off guard. So, Jackie, I want to talk to you about that. The president, as Skyler just mentioned, says that he wants people to think of the rally as a celebration. How have Republicans been responding to that?
we haven't seen, many Republicans come out and defend the president's decision to hold a rally in Tulsa, as you just said, the location of one of the worst massacres of African Americans in U.S. history, on the same day as Emancipation Day, June 19th. Despite Trump denying the significance of Tulsa and calling it a celebration, he's, one, never held a rally in Oklahoma, and it's firmly a red state that he won by 36 percentage points in 2016. So the choice of location is certainly odd. And as you've heard Democrats say, it's a not so subtle dog whistle as you pointed out, Kamala Harris saying it's a wave at white supremacists. This is just another, notch for and another instance of Republicans sort of dodging and head faking and avoiding having to defend the president's actions. The RNC has doubled down on the decision. The president has himself, and you even have, advisors from the president and his campaign, including Katrina Pearson, a black advisor for the president, defend the decision, saying that as the party of Lincoln, Republicans are proud of the history of Juneteenth. But again, we have seen very few Republicans on the Hill come out and defend this decision.
Jackie, we heard Kamala Harris say that it was an overt wink to white supremacists. How much in your reporting do you think that it was intentional versus the Trump administration simply didn't have any advisors that were familiar enough with Black history to recognize that this could potentially be a problem?
Look, that is it's a debate that I think most reporters are having right now and getting different information from different advisors, close to the president or working on the campaign or within the White House. And you get a different answer depending on who you're talking to, which is usually how it goes with this administration. The administration, especially in the White House, has been known to be, disorganized and not have representative voices to even advise the president on making those decisions. That being said, I don't think we can ignore this president's past history and record of making inflammatory, incendiary, and racist statements that really cross the line on what is acceptable. This is really just the latest. So whether or not it's incompetence, disorganization, and not having, an advisor warn the president off of this, or if it was a deliberate decision, either way, it's eye-popping.
All right, Jackie Alemany, Skyler Henry, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Lana.